Hey, friends, thank you for joining me for this live stream on the topic of owning your expert identity. Now, if you've been following me for more than a moment, then you already know that I transitioned into my current role as a business strategist and coach for female entrepreneurs from a 20-year career as a psychotherapist. Now, even in my private practice as a therapist, many of my clients were women, very smart women, very accomplished women, often highly educated women. And so I started to recognize patterns in the way they think and the way they behave a long time before I started helping with women like this with their businesses. So some of the common threads that I have seen again and again and again is especially for women, and I am part of this group as well. So I am not coaching or teaching or mentoring or leading from an academic perspective, but from a body of work, which includes my lived experience. So, what I'd like to break down and talk about today is the fact that even though it may seem really counterintuitive and almost kind of perverse in a way, the reality is if you are a female in particular, born a female, raised a female, identify as a female, you have been culturally conditioned according to a feminine identity, whether you are conservative, liberal, highly educated, or completely uneducated. And the reality is that women are culturally raised differently, different set of rules, different set of roles, different set of responsibilities. Now, feminism notwithstanding, um, we do tend to be more aware in general than our male counterparts of how we are perceived by others. And we tend to be a lot more concerned with how we are perceived by others. So when you start your own business as a coach, a consultant, a creative, an independent professional, a service provider in some way, shape, or form, and you need to market this business and you need to attract leads, clients, customers, contracts for this business. And you need to close sales because you got to get paid unless you happen to be a charity or a not-for-profit. But those are not my clients, and that's what not what we're talking about today. What I have learned and experienced is that in most cases, the more of an expert you actually are, the more likely you are going to experience fear of vulnerability, fear of exposure, fear of visibility. We can think about those three things as fear of being seen, fear of being seen, fear of being heard, fear of being witnessed as who we actually are. Now, this may seem bizarre because people like us are legitimate experts. Legitimate experts. We have the education, we have the credentials, we have the training. We've done all the things, checked all the boxes, and we've done these things for a considerable amount of time. So, in the pre-internet world, in the world where most of us were in some sort of business, organization, nonprofit, perhaps in a private practice of some sort, as a physician, a psychologist, an attorney, we got clients oftentimes based on word of mouth, oftentimes based on referrals from people who have worked with us and recommended us. And that worked great until it didn't. And especially now as a result of COVID and a lot of brick and mortar businesses, the types I've just been talking about, are closed. A lot of people had to go virtual, telehealth, telemedicine, teletherapy, tele everything. And once they did, and they couldn't go back for a while, they realized I actually can work this way, and I can work this way effectively. I can work this way successfully. I can meet the needs of my clients virtually. So maybe I don't have to go back to having an office. But that also means that unless you have a license that restricts you to working with people in a specific location, For example, I have an inactive California state license as a clinical social worker. I now work with people all over California, all over the US, and actually all over the world. But I do so as a coach, which means I can no longer rely on local buzz and word of mouth. I need to market myself. And here's where things get interesting. Because when we make that transition from face to face to online, and when we make that transition from brick and mortar to working out of your back bedroom or your kitchen table or a little corner of your master bedroom, whatever your particular setup is, and you're no longer relying on going to the Rotary Club meetings or being part of the Chamber of Commerce or the Women's Club or whatever in your local area where you would get clients that way and remind people of what you do and so forth. Now you are in the marketing business. And something I see over and over and over, no matter how much of an expert someone is, almost across the board, they range from saying, I hate marketing and selling, like they really hate it. They resent that they have to do it and they hardcore avoid it, even though they know it's necessary. A lot of people will go out and get credentials, certifications of various sorts that they actually don't even need because they are actually already an expert, because they believe when I have this credential, let's say they get trained by somebody who's noteworthy. They go through that person's training. They go through that person's certification. They may do so for personal and professional growth. There's nothing wrong with that. I've done many of these. But oftentimes, they go through these certifications or training programs because they want the credential, because now they can be listed on the website of that. It could be Strength Finder. They could be a Strength Finder coach. They could be an Enneagram coach. They could be a Brene Brown, whatever, whomever, or even an ICF certified coach. Because the belief is if I have this credential, I can be listed on this website and people will find me because they're looking for that and they'll kind of stumble across me there and they'll hire me because I have that credential. When the underlying belief is I won't have to market myself. Being affiliated with this credential, this person, this organization will do the marketing for me. I'm here to tell you that rarely works. And even if you do get a handful of people who happen to find you on one of those directories, you're up there with dozens, hundreds, potentially thousands of others who have the same credential. So while you may get some clients for that, you're not going to have a sustainable consulting or coaching practice. I mean, ideally, it's like your financial planner would tell you, you need to diversify your investments. I believe you, in most cases, need to diversify your marketing so that you're not reliant on one particular source. So why do we resist, resent, avoid marketing so much as experts? Well, in my experience, it comes down to a few things. One, many of us believe that we shouldn't have to market ourselves. Many of us feel that I have the education, I have the training, I have trained at, worked at, been educated by the best of the best, and that should stand for itself. Maybe that sounds entitled to some of you. Maybe that sounds arrogant to some of you. But many people have made lots of sacrifices in order to get into the best schools, the best training programs, work for the best organizations for that very reason. Because their pedigree looks impeccable. And there's nothing wrong with that. I went to UCLA for both my bachelor's and my master's, not only because it was a highly reputable educational institution, but that was part of my decision. And the places I worked, of course, I considered the reputation of those places and how that would reflect upon me and my resume. But once you go into the online world and once you start marketing yourself there, all of those things weigh a lot less. They don't carry the same weight. And many legitimate experts kind of they're kind of butthurt about that. They're kind of resentful about it. They feel like I've done my time. I have the credentials. I have an impeccable pedigree. I have all the best places listed on my resume. And you'll hear that they often bring them up. But it's not enough anymore. Some people don't even care that you have a Harvard MBA or you got your master's at Columbia. They honestly don't care. On my first website a number of years ago, I've been self-employed since 2010. So on my first website, I actually on my about page, I included a lot of information about my pedigree, my credentials, my impressive education, and the places I've worked. And by the time I had redone my website a couple of times, now I have a link that says, if you want to know more about my academic and experience, my academic training and experience, click here. Because I learned, and many of my clients learn from me, although they're not happy with me when I first tell them, that a lot of people simply don't care. They want to know, do you get me? Can you help me? And will the experience give me the outcome that I'm looking for? And can I afford it? It's all about them. And honestly, I think it should be. I mean, if you are a consultant or a coach, you're an independent professional, you're a creative, it's not like you're going to do neurosurgery on them. You need to be qualified, you need to be competent, but most people expect that everybody kind of is. It's almost like since we've been shopping on the internet, we we've become more emotional decision makers. Funny thing is, human beings are emotional decision makers. We like to think we're logical, we are not. And I think we're even more emotional decision makers than we used to be because of how the internet works, how so many things are gamed, how it's all about the dopamine. It's all about the shiny objects. So I think that if you are an expert and you believe that you shouldn't have to market yourself, you shouldn't have to market yourself. Damn it. Because you know your stuff. You've been doing it for a long time. And why do I have to keep proving that to people? Number one reason, as I've stated, a lot of people simply don't care. In fact, I have spoken about this on the podcast. And if you're new here, I'm talking about the Driven Woman Entrepreneur podcast. It's listed below in the frame. And the definition of an expert has changed as a result of the internet, as a result of online marketing, and as a result of the coaching industry. The new definition of an expert, if you haven't heard me say this before, is you are an expert to the person who's two steps behind you. Now, I'm a little snarky. Actually, I'm kind of a lot snarky. I'm kind of sassy and spicy, and I like to say things that provoke people. But that also happened to be true. And one of the things I like to say is if you consider yourself an expert because you're two steps ahead of the people you're trying to help, we used to call that the blind leading the blind. And in many cases, I think it still is. Now, that's not to say that everybody needs an expert. for everything. I think we each need to decide. Each of us needs to decide and not just be swept away by somebody who has a really charismatic online presence, but doesn't actually know anything. We have to curb our enthusiasm for that level of impulsivity. But do you actually need a legitimate expert? It's a really good question to ask yourself. And if you are a legitimate expert, how do you embrace the reality that unless you have a steady stream of referrals, you're lucky enough to have that, and it's consistent enough, and you're able to close enough of those referral leads to clients to meet your income and profitability goals, then keep doing what you're doing. In fact, you're probably not even here listening to me if that's the case. But that's not the case for most of us. And for most of us who've made the transition from working in an organization, an academic institution, a nonprofit organization, or a corporation, and we are now working for ourselves online, most of us need to market. So it does not serve us as experts, as legitimate experts, to be butthurt and resentful that that is, in fact, the reality. Because we don't have to do this in most cases. I mean, most of us could go back and get a job. Most of us could do something else or retire but if you're self-employed, I don't care if you're on Etsy, Fiverr, Upwork, you're part of a referral group. You go to, I don't remember the names of the meetings, but this meetings in the community where BNI, I think, Business Networking International, you refer to each other. You got to market yourself. So I don't think it serves you to be resentful about that. What I think actually serves you is, whether you like it or not, accepting the reality that the definition of an expert is changing in many industries, and it may be changing in yours. In fact, in previous, and some of this is generational, by the way. In fact, I think a lot of it's generational. I think the generation that I am a part of holds a lot more value for the legitimate expert. And I think Gen Y, Gen Z, they're more likely to want to hire someone or work with someone who is more relatable to them. This may be like an age bias. This might be a gender bias. This might be simply that they don't have many conversations with people who are decades older than them, and they don't feel comfortable doing so. Some people simply get triggered by the fact that you're 20 or 30 or 40 years older than them, and they automatically jump to the conclusion that you won't get them. And the reality is, a lot of older people, while they may have tons of experience and a legitimate expertise, they're culturally out of touch with their potential buyers. And that's one of the other issues here. If we think I shouldn't have to market myself, well, hey, you know what? The fact is you do. So help yourself get over that. Accept the reality of it. Understand that since you need to market yourself, I wouldn't say if, since you need to market yourself, I've already talked about the exception, don't need to talk about that anymore. Since you need to market yourself, if you want to do business with people who are considerably younger than you, it is in your best interest to understand their culture, to understand how they see the world, to understand how they see people who look and act and think like you, so that you can bridge the gap. Now, that doesn't mean you should start behaving like someone in your 20s if you are, in fact, in your 50s or 60s. That's embarrassing and cringy. And they'll probably make fun of you and post it on TikTok, but you won't see it because you're not on TikTok. I think making the decision to work with people of different genders, of different presentations, of different identities, and going across generational lines for marketing, it requires growth in your area. They may not even care that you have all these credentials and all these degrees and all these shiny, impressive to some people things on your wall. They just need to know that you get them. And this can be a challenge for legitimate experts. And some people will say, well, I don't want to work with those young people because, and they'll give all kinds of reasons. I mean, you're self-employed. You get to decide who you want to work with. But I think it's a real missed opportunity when we tell ourselves, I already know everything I need to know. I've already done everything. I've earned my street cred, so to speak, and I shouldn't have to impress anybody to get a sale. Reality is you do. Now, not everybody cares about expertise. So are you barking up the wrong tree? Are you leaning your ladder against the wrong wall? Are you wasting your frickin' time? If you are leaning heavily on your expert status and trying to get leads, clients, customers from people who are considerably younger than you who don't value those things, that might be a mistake for you. It might be. If there are enough people who are closer to your age who do value your expert status because that's part of the culture of their generation, there are enough of them, you're more comfortable with you're more comfortable with them, then that's your target market. But if you do want to work with people who maybe don't value your expertise as much, simply because that's just not the culture they've grown up with, do you need to write them off as prospects altogether? I think not. See, I think that knowing that you're an expert, a legitimate expert, and not getting too caught up in commiserating about the fact that nobody values experts anymore. Nobody cares about my expertise anymore. There's an anti-expert bias on the internet, which, by the way, I think there is, especially in the coaching industry. That's all true. But you get to decide that you're going to be butthurt about it and you're going to feel like a victim of it and you're going to just grouse and moan and complain, bitch and whine about it. Or you could say, well, if I want to stay in business and I need to market myself and I do need or want to work with people from different generations who may not value my expertise in the same way that I value it, what do I need to learn? How do I need to grow? What skills do I need to develop to be able to close that gap a little bit? See, I think the only problem that I see with being an expert is when we think it's enough. We can rest on our laurels, so to speak. I just think the world has changed so much in the last few years that someone who thinks in that way is going to become a dinosaur. They're literally going to be sitting in the La Brea tar pits, just becoming redundant and invisible. And I think it's a shitty way to end an expert career. So what I prefer, what I recommend, what I'm doing, and what I help my clients with is how do we leverage our expert status in these ways? One, identify who actually values your expert status. The people who already want to work with experts. That's your low-hanging fruit. Continue to market specifically to them. And to them, share your expertise. Share the organizations that you've worked at. Share the places that you've got your degrees from, because they already care about that. And learn about what other people value, whom you can also serve if you choose to. If you choose to. Or if there aren't enough of those who already value your expert status. And when we start reaching across the gap, thank you, Carrie, I appreciate your comment. Reaching across the gap, reaching across the divide, and connecting with people who maybe don't care so much that you're an expert, but are willing to work with you because you have the necessary skills to help them. You will develop so much awareness as a human being. You will become so much more relatable. And the opportunity to work with a wide variety of people who think, look, feel, believe, present, and make decisions differently than you, for me, is really valuable. Now, I often talk about my ADHD and the fact that I'm a relentlessly curious human being. So I love things that are new, and I love challenging myself to learn new ways of doing things and doing the same things with different people. That's an opportunity for me to grow. It's also security for my business and for my financial viability over time. We can't just expect the world is going to stay the way we've known it to be as evidence of that shrinks and refuse to branch out. I work with people anywhere from their 20s to their 70s. Now, I kind of do have a sweet spot. The people that I tend to love working with the most are like Gen Xers because they're mature. I just think they're a special group, and I think they're very overlooked. I think a lot of people are focusing on millennials. I love millennials. I love millennials. A lot of people my age do not. But then again, when I was a single parent for many years and people found out I had 3 teenagers that I was raising alone, they were like, "Oh, you poor thing." I loved the teen years because I love change. I thought my kids were fascinating. They were literally changing every single day, and that meant that I needed to change. So, in our last remaining minutes for today, I want to talk about um, the other challenges when we decide, okay, I'm an expert, but I'm not going to just lean on that. I'm not just going to expect that everybody's going to come flocking to me because I'm an expert, because some of them don't care, because some of them won't relate to you because they're going to think you're kind of ivory tower. And others will be like, I don't think you understand me because I'm not an expert, right? You need to give me more. You need to give me more than that to latch onto. But as you start to reach out, as you start to what I call show up, stand up, and speak up, as you start to say, this is what I do, this is who I do it for, I happen to be very good at it, you might want to consider working with me. Now, I'm being a little silly because that's my personality, but to be able to do that when we've come from a background of expecting people to just come to us because of what we know, it requires us to confront 3 things. 1, our perfectionism. Most of the women that I work with and myself are perfectionists. We're good girls. We're A+ students. And it can be very challenging for us to put ourselves out there on a regular basis if we can't do it perfectly. We're fussing about some grays we see in our hair when we get on video. We're fussing about the fact that we had a typo in a social post. We're fussing about the fact that our podcast episode, we kind of flubbed the guest's name or had a loss of words at some point. We're like, oh, take it out, take it out, take it out to the editor. People don't buy perfect anymore. I got news for you. As a matter of fact, if you're too polished, if you are too perfect, if what you put out there in the world by way of marketing is too produced, a lot of people are going to give you the side eye and scroll on by, because that can signal that you're not real, you're not relatable, and that means you're not trustworthy. So we need to confront our perfectionism. In fact, a lot of the work that I do in my coaching program called the Boss Up Breakthrough is addressing the unholy trinity, my words: perfectionism, procrastination, and people pleasing. And I see these almost across the board with female experts. We have to also address two other things that come up when we really start putting ourselves out there. Imposter syndrome. And I got to tell you, if you have imposter syndrome, imposter complex, imposter issues, whatever you call it, that is proof that you are an expert. How do you like that? Because people who are fake experts, people who are what I like to call shamelessly self-promoting know-nothings, they don't have imposter issues. They're imposters. You're the real deal. So if you're the real deal and you have imposter issues, that is circular logic. It is evidence that you're the real deal. So accept it as that. Accept that you're going to have these imposter issues. Don't wait for them to go away or resolve themselves. Just keep showing up. They become more manageable. I have said this before, but if Adele can throw up or have a panic attack before she goes on stage and she still gets her ass out there and slays, you can too. I mean, maybe you don't need to throw up. Lastly, if you, like me, are ADHD, or if you are highly creative, if you are on the spectrum, if you are an empath, if you are a highly sensitive person, if any of those labels apply to you, you probably deal with rejection sensitivity. Now, the ADHD community loves to claim this rejection sensitive dysphoria. And if you legitimately have rejection sensitive dysphoria, it's like playing chutes and ladders. You go up and you go down. And when you get triggered by the perception that you are being rejected, excluded, overlooked, you can go all the way down to the bottom of the game and feel like absolute crap, just like that. I help people deal with this, but you should know that as an expert, if you have rejection sensitivity, it's going to show up in a variety of ways. And one of the sneaky ways that I see it showing up is people just not putting themselves out there by continuously perfecting something, continuously tweaking something, continuously working on something. You know how many brilliant women I've met who have been writing a book for 10 or more years? I believe in many cases, I mean, there's many, many reasons for this, but I have known of several that it's the anticipation that once they put the book out there, that it will not be well received, that people will find fault with it, people will criticize it, people will give them bad reviews, and that seems absolutely terrifying. The prospect of that is excruciating. So they never finish the book. See how that works? And I think that rejection sensitivity, not only actually being rejected or feeling rejected, but anticipating that rejection will keep a lot of people stuck in the muck. So don't let this be you. If you are the real deal, if you are a genuine expert, you are good enough now. You don't need anyone's permission, including mine, to take up more space, to put yourself out there, to show up, stand up, speak up, to do what I like to call name it and claim it. This is who I am. This is what I do. This is who it's for. Maybe I can help you. And on that note, maybe I can help you. So if you are still listening and you would like help to experience your own boss up breakthrough in your business, you've already been at this for a while, you're working way too hard for the money you're making and the energy you're putting in, given the fact that you are already an expert and you were an expert before you took your business online. Let's talk and see if I am the right person for the right reason at the right time. This is my favorite thing to do, is help legitimate experts take up more space so that they can be found, they can be valued, and they can be paid what they deserve. So reach out to me on my website if you would like that. And if you're not ready for that, don't forget, you can get a lot of really valuable free content by listening to the Driven Woman Entrepreneur podcast and signing up for my free private podcast. You do need to give me your email address for that. And that one's called Show Up Like a Boss. Links to all that juicy goodness is on my website. So I'll say goodbye for now, and I will be back next week. Thank you for joining me.